Hi there, another in the series on wartime special operations. And it's been discussed in many of the books that the training and selection of agents for SOE was a pipeline. It's also been described as a sieve, which started at introductory centres, usually in the home counties area. The French went to Wambre Manor, and this was a period of toughening up, seeing that the trainees had the necessary qualities to be an agent. They were tested in physically, in endurance, but also in social settings. Can they hold a drink? Do they become too talkative and start giving away stuff? And obviously, language was the other thing that they were tested on. Those who passed that went up to Scotland to the paramilitary schools, where they were taught silent killing, sabotage, demolitions, fieldcraft, land nav, things like that. They then went to specialized training if it was necessary. If they were going to be, for example, a wireless operator, they had to go through that training, or for other relevant types of activity they might be engaged in. If they were going to be using boats, for example. And then the final level of the pipeline was the finishing schools. And these were in the area around Beaulieu, Hampshire, not far from Bournemouth, where the seat of Lord Montagu of Beaulieu had a number of properties in a very, very beautiful part of the world, the New Forest. And Lord Montagu, the current Lord Montagu, commissioned the book, Beaulieu, the Finishing School for Secret Agents, and he asked Cyril Cunningham, who was a former Army intelligence officer, to write it. Now, I found the idea that Lord Montagu commissioned the book very interesting, because I visited Beaulieu when I was on a protection team. We were on an official visit there, and I met Lord Montagu, and I asked him at the time if there was anything there that was linked to the wartime SOE use, and he seemed rather surprised and said no, there was nothing. And in his foreword to the book, he said he had a long interest in the connection with SOE. And in fact, there is a plaque in the cloisters, and there was at the time, and I would have liked to have gone and looked at it and had a photograph of it. So I found that a little bit strange. Anyway, the book goes into how Beaulieu was set up. The it was actually used for other purposes by SOE before it was designated the finishing school. The French used it, for example, French F section. And one of the major operations, Josephine B, was planned there, which was a sabotage operation against an electrical installation in France, which was supplying power to U-boat pens and things. And the saboteurs went over there and very successfully attacked the facility and got away. And for a while, the Germans thought it was actually being bombed by the RAF. So that really put SOE on the map. But then in early 1941, it was made into the finishing school. And the first commanding officer was Jimmy Munn, who had worked at Arisaig previously, and he was there for a while, and then he went off to Canada and then to other schools throughout the world. The staff were recruited from many sources, They didn't have access to the SIS people. SIS did have a training centre. There's been some dispute about this, but they had a training centre in Ham Place. But obviously their relationship with SOE was very, very fraught, and there was no cooperation there. Well, one of the places they did get instructors from was for the Intelligence Corps. They had a centre, a training centre at Matlock, and some of the guys were sent down to Beaulieu. And then you had a variety of other people, including Kim Philby. He was there for a while, and Paul Den. And Paul Den later became a novelist and screenwriter, and he wrote a really good spy film, wartime spy film called Orders to Kill. It's very, very accurate film. Most of the students didn't know the names of the houses, the individual houses that they were trained at, and they used to have conducting officers. So a course would come down and it would be dedicated to a particular country section with a conducting officer, and they'd go through the program at Beaulieu. And one of the major parts of the Beaulieu training was, in fact, created by Paul Den, and it was a finishing exercise which lasted several days, and it took place around Bournemouth, and it was basically tradecraft, how to have clandestine meetings, use dead letter boxes, this kind of thing, how to run a surveillance detection route, avoid surveillance, and dealing with security checkpoints and this kind of thing, all the things that they're going to need in the occupied areas. So that was a highlight. And it also incorporated resistance to interrogation training. And this was probably a first, actually, in the annals of training in the United Kingdom, where they would be lifted and taken to an interrogation facility and put through sometimes quite severe questioning by people who were impersonating the Gestapo and SD. So that was fairly realistic. Another thing they did was security was very, very tight. And when the trainees were off duty or the staff were off duty, they had people from the field security police in the area, in the pubs and so on, listening for any loose talk. And they also used some of the female secretaries to engage the trainees in conversation and see if they were boasting about what they were doing or if they kept to the cover stories. And there was one of these ladies who later became a writer, Noreen Reals, and she wrote about, unfortunately, some people did lapse their security and she had to report them. The final thing I'll say is that one of the instructors, Peter Follis, he went into SIS after the war and ran their paramilitary training because it was found that there was a necessity for it during the Cold War. At the end of World War II, they didn't foresee a role for an SOE type organization, and it was completely disbanded. But then it was recognized that SIS or intelligence services needed to have that capability, and so Peter Follis had gone into that role and stayed or made the leap from SOE instructor to training SIS agents and officers. So the book, it's the only real book on this particular topic, although there's been a couple now on the training, and Mr. Cunningham's interviewed a lot of people. There's a lot more detail in the book than I've covered in this brief overview, and it does fill in a big part of the SOE picture. It's well worth being on your library shelf.